Good morning. Thank you for coming today. I'm Chick Hardy with the Benedictine Institute, and I'd like to welcome you here today. I'm really pleased that Sister Michaela is going to be speaking with us today, and I'll give her an introduction as soon as I give you a little known fact about quinoa. That's the one of the dishes that was served today was quinoa and spinach, and there's 120 different varieties of quinoa. But one of the most interesting facts I found was that Inca warriors used to make balls of quinoa and fat so that they could sustain themselves in their long marches and in battle. So, in essence, it's the human version of a suet ball. And it will be, yes. So, and that has nothing to do with anything else that's going to happen. But you might share that at supper tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce Sister Michaela Medican. She was born up in Virginia, Minnesota. She attended Regis High School in Eau Claire, which was staffed by Benedictines, and she joined the Sisters of St. Bede Monastery during her senior year of high school. So she was committed from early on. She made her first profession in July of 1964 and her perpetual profession in 1967. Sister Michaela she graduated from the College of St. Scholastica in Duluth, and she has 2 master's degrees, one in religious education from Seattle University, and the other one in theology from our own School of Theology here. She was a middle school teacher from 1966 to 1984. Those must have been entertaining years. And from 2003 to 2009, she served as president of the Federation of St. Benedict and as prioress at St. Bede Monastery from 2008 until they joined this community in St. Joseph in August of 2010. On February 27th, 2011, she was elected the 16th prioress of the Sisters of the Order of St. Benedict in St. Joseph, and she was installed in June of 2011. So it is my pleasure to welcome Sister Michaela Medican.
Thank you, Chick. That's great. I just want to assure you, you won't need that human suet ball to sit and listen to me, because I'll try to move right along. It is indeed a delight to be able to be here with you, so many friends and some people that I've met that I haven't met before. It's a delight to be able to share about something that's obviously very close to my heart and a very recent, pretty much lived experience as such. I also want to begin with a disclaimer. You know, that's kind of a popular thing to do today. About a month or so ago, I was sharing in a conference with our sisters some ideas about transition and change and attitudes about change and the like. And I cannot tell you how many sisters came to me afterwards and says, is there something that's going to happen that we don't know about? I assured them there wasn't, and I want to assure you that there is nothing that I know about that is coming. But I think anybody who's breathing and living and moving knows that life is full of change. And how we face change and the transitions that we go through is very important. And there is a way to kind of prepare for it, I have found, as I've been reflecting on all of this as such. Particularly for us as we look at the strategic direction planning for 2020 that's been going on both campuses. We know the challenges that are before us, and we know that challenges usually have some dimension of change or transition with it. So I am aware that, some people in here, we'd be probably a pretty usual microcosm of the world today. Some of you thrive on change. Some of you do the very best that you can to put up with it. And some resist it with everything they have. And that's just fine. Honor where you are with it. But I would just invite you to, as I share today, to take a look at this in light of your own personal life and your professional life. in terms of, looking back at changes you have known and what you learned from it, as well as staying open to what may be asked of you. So there's a lot of levels here, and I know that when you listen to speakers, you can go off on a lot of different tangents, and I really encourage you to do that as such. I think probably Mark Twain said it best: the only person who likes change is a wet baby. But we all know that we have to somehow deal with it. As Chick said, it's going to be 5 years in August 15th, since 28 of us from St. Bede Monastery in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, transferred our profession to St. Benedict's Monastery. It was a very tender ritual and prayer service that we experienced as we did that. And it was so wonderful to have some of my sisters here today. I told them in the car coming over, now if I make a mistake, you stand up and say, wrong. It was shortly after that, in November, that 7 sisters from Mount Benedict Monastery in Ogden, Utah, came to St. Benedict's Monastery after preparation and planning and prayerful discernment that had gone on from both monasteries beforehand. And at that point, we didn't know both of us were doing that. Mount Benedict found out that we were, and then I think they began to think about it. And there were just 7 sisters. And so in November of 2010, they transferred their profession as such. The age range was interesting. At St. Bede Monastery, our age range was from the 50s to 98. So think about it, a 98-year-old leaving someplace. Actually, she was coming home again because she had entered at St. Ben's. And for the sisters at Mount Benedict, it was 50 to 80. The youngest was 50, and the oldest was in her 80s as such. Sister Nancy Bauer was the prioress at that time, and she and her staff and the community at St. Ben's were absolutely fantastic in terms of welcoming, the hospitality, and the journeying with us as we made that transition as such. It was a real example of St. Benedict in his chapter 4 of the rule has many guidelines by which we can live. And one of my favorite one is never turn away when someone needs your love. And that's what the sisters at St. Ben's did. They did not turn away when we needed their love and needed to kind of move through a number of different things. Both of the communities, both the one in Wisconsin and in Utah, had done very much prayerful discernment and a desire to be good stewards of our resources. We were not in crises, either community, but we knew we wanted to take a look at the resources that we had and how did we want to move into the future with those resources. And we knew that there were not enough of us to care for our senior sisters. And so that really pretty much moved us to that ability to take a look at, we do need to do something. It was, the process was a very lengthy one, a very tender one. Every sister in the community, because that's a Benedictine tradition, had a right to go wherever she wanted to go. Sister Nancy would be proud of me because I wanted to quote some canon law to you. You all know that Sister Nancy's background is canon law. Canonically, if a community is dissolving, which is what happened with both of our communities, a sister is free to be dispensed of her profession. So that was an option. A sister could have gone to any community to begin a process of transfer. That's another option. Or we could have gone as a group. All 28 of us chose to come to St. Ben's, and the 7 of them from Mount Benedict also chose to come back to St. Ben's. So there were a number of different options. That only makes it harder to make a decision. And we did not know at Eau Claire, we did not know until the last person had read where she was feeling God was calling her to go, that all 28 of us were going to come to the same place. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that before. We came together then in 2011, or 2010, and in 2011, as Chick said, I was called forth as leader of the community, a very humbling experience. I'll give you a little background on that too. I was saying at the table, you probably could get a quarter credit in monastic studies here in some dimension once we get sharing some background as such in terms of this. To give you that little brief background, it's important to know that this community at St. Bede Monastery in Eau Claire and the community at Mount Benedict were founded by St. Benedict's Monastery. St. Benedict's Monastery has founded communities all over the world. At one time, St. Benedict's Monastery was the largest Benedictine women's community in the entire world. Their number peaked in 1946 at 1,287. And that was also a time when we began to take a look at people asking us to come and start communities because of the Ministry of Education and Hospital Ministry. Basically, the sisters in Eau Claire, we were basically educators. That's why we took the name of St. Bede. And the sisters in Ogden, when they were called forth, they went into hospital care. They were asked to come out there. Interestingly enough, it was in 1892 that the sisters from St. Ben's first went to Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So we had a long history there. To St. Patrick Parish, interesting story with that. The pastor at the parish had come up to see the prioress at the time because he asked if she would possibly have anybody who could work with the Irish children at St. Patrick's School. They had already been through 2 communities that left because they couldn't handle the Irish kids. And I wasn't one of them. I later went back there to teach, however. And interestingly enough, we still have one sister there that's in pastoral ministry. We've only had 1 year since in 1892 that we haven't had a Benedictine sister at St. Patrick's Parish. So the sisters at Ogden were asked in 1944 to come to Ogden, Utah, in Mormon territory to start a hospital. And so they were a little bit behind us in terms of the length of history, but the impact that they made on that area of Salt Lake City and Ogden, which is just outside of Salt Lake City, is just unbelievable. Today, we are 237 sisters in the community. We are still the largest women's community of Benedictines in the Americas, and probably in much of Europe, but Asia and Africa have larger women's communities as such now, which is always hope-filling because we know that it will continue on as such. Because I want to get so much in here, I've jotted down some notes that I want to be sure that I'm going to be incorporating here. The community of St. Benedict's, as I mentioned, began in the 40s even to take a look at areas that were asking them to come and serve them, even earlier than that. And the thought was that not only were they going to just serve in these areas, but they would establish new foundations in these areas. So about that time of the largeness, in 1946, when it was at its largest, that became a real concern. How do we establish new monasteries? And so for those of you that aren't aware of it, eventually, as time went on, a community was established in Japan, one in Taiwan, one in Puerto Rico, and one in the Bahamas, as well as 8 here in the United States that the community of St. Ben's has established. I've had the opportunity, and I'll share a little bit about that a little bit later too, to be in all of those places a number of times. And I have to tell you, standing in Taiwan, actually with Sister Josue, and thinking what St. Benedict's community has done in touching the world is just humbling. And here it is in our little St. Joe. It takes your breath away when you think about it. Now, let me tell you that the Benedictine tradition is not to be that large. St. Benedict usually was looking at 10, 12, if it got larger than that, he never gave us a specific number, it shouldn't be. But it's not supposed to be huge like most communities are. And St. Benedict's realizing that, it made it much easier to move on. However, when you're establishing new communities, you've got 2 choices. You can either, as a new community, being independent, you can be under the bishop, or you can be under Rome. Think about it for a moment. Most communities prefer to be under Rome, far, far away. Being under the bishop can be a real challenge. For one thing, when the bishop changes, it can have a real impact on the community. But Rome, realizing that Benedictines do stay small, said, okay, you can do this. You can be connected to Rome, but you're going to have to form a federation. You're going to have to unite. And a federation is an association of autonomous monasteries that come together for mutual support. And the Federation of St. Benedict then was formed, actually canonically approved by Rome in 1947, just before 48, when we became an independent monastery. In 1948, St. Bede's was ready to establish themselves as an independent monastery. The Mount Benedict established themselves in 1994. So again, it was much later as such. The Federation is that association that then calls forth a president, and that president is at each of those autonomous communities every time they elect a prioress for visitation when that prioress is installed, and also presides at the triennial meeting that they have where delegates from each of the communities come. This is why I told you you're going to get a quarter credit in monasticism here. It's well organized, and what happens is that federation has the constitution, but every autonomous community applies it the way that they need to apply it for the specifics. It was a wonderful opportunity when I very surprisingly was called forth to be the president of the Federation in 2003. It was a very big surprise. I was actually in the nursing home in Eau Claire as a coordinator for our sisters who needed nursing care, and we had a wing in a public nursing home. So I went from 8 sisters at that time that were in the nursing home with me to 800 all over the world. But it was wonderful. And this is the first thing I would ask you to think about very, very specifically in your own life. The past is always prelude. The past is always prelude. And this is the past. Okay? What you may be going through right now, the people you may be meeting, what you may be studying, even what you may be struggling with, is going to be supporting you down the road. When we made the decision that we needed to join another community, because I had had that experience of working with the monasteries, I knew St. Ben's. When I was called forth in leadership, I knew Utah and St. Bede and St. Ben's very well because I had spent time with them. Bare minimum, in 6 years, you visit every monastery 4 times when you're the president of the Federation. So I was in Japan and Taiwan and Puerto Rico and the Bahamas, and then all 8 monasteries here, at least 4 times, and some more than that. Let me also tell you that if you're working for the church, I did not go to the Bahamas or Puerto Rico in January, ever. It was July. That's how you know you're working for the church. So do keep that in mind. The past is always prelude. In the economy of God, nothing ever gets lost. At the time that we came in 2010 from Eau Claire to St. Ben's, there were 11 sisters of the 28 that had originally come from St. Ben's. And here they had to make that decision a second time. They had to make the decision in 1948 to form St. Bede's and leave St. Ben's. And now they were making it to come back. Our oldest sister at age 98 was so funny one day. She said, "Oh my goodness, the last time I had to make this decision to leave St. Ben's, we couldn't talk to anybody. And now that's all we're doing is talking about it." And I said to her, "Now, which do you think is better?" She said, "Talking about it." She was a very wise woman, for sure. All 7 of the sisters from Utah that returned to St. Ben's had been a part of St. Ben's until 1994, so they really had a much greater familiarity. They were home every summer for retreats and the like. So many of our sisters from St. Bede's had gone to school here. As you noticed, I was not one of them. 4 of my classmates came, but the prioress decided where you went, and I never did ask her why I went north, and they came here. So they had a little bit better understanding, but many of us had worked with the sisters here or had gone to school here, as I said, or had been on committees. St. Ben's was always held in great esteem by St. Bede, and I know that was also by St. Mount Benedict in Utah. We finally had to reach a point where they said, well, just because they did it at St. Ben's doesn't mean we have to do it here in Eau Claire. On the other hand, it was always affectionately referred to as Grandma's house for the new members that were coming in. And I remember one Easter Monday, that was our Amos. We got to go on a trip to come to Grandma's house. And that was the first time I had been to St. Ben's. So it was a great thrill. So what I'd like to do now with that background, so you could kind of see a little of the workings of how this all came about and setting the context, is to just share with you a little bit, and I will try to leave a little time for questions or comments from my own sisters in regard to that. What I'd like to share with you is what we've learned as we reflect on this, what I've learned and what, as I've talked to some of the sisters. Now, we haven't formally sat down and reviewed this, but there's 2 basic areas. The area of what we've learned about grief and gratitude, and what we've learned about the area of resiliency, which is a much studied topic. Now, before I talk anything about grief and gratitude, I do want to acknowledge that, given again the population here, that there may be some of you who are in the midst of grief for some reason, a death in the family or some loss. So please be very gentle with yourself as I share. But hopefully, maybe some of this will help you move through it a little bit more easily as such. For us, for me as a Roman Catholic Benedictine, this is a wonderful time to talk about grief and gratitude because we're in the Easter season. And I have a very deep bias that the Easter season is certainly about joy and resurrection and hallelujah. But I think it's also about grieving. If you read the Gospels, they show us that there are a variety of ways to grieve. Mary stayed at the tomb. You know, some people stay where the grief is. Peter, he went fishing. And then we had the 2 disciples that got out of Dodge. You know, they went to Emmaus. And those are pretty typical of how people do grieve as such. And I'm going to have to do this a little lightly, but at least I want to set kind of a little background on it. For us at St. Bede, and I know at Mount Benedict as I worked with them, we wanted to set this in a context of who we were. And so the first things that we did is we tried to determine, what we're going to do here is that we wrote an Exodus prayer. We connected this to the story of the gospel, which is, of the Old Testament, the Exodus story, which is the premier story of all of us, the journey that we are all on. And then we included in that prayer that we pray daily for guidance and wisdom, all refugees and people who were displaced. Because we knew in the end we would have some place to go, but we know many people who were in between situations that they didn't know what the future would be. So that would be the second point that I would say to you. Whenever you're facing something in your life, always try to connect it to the body of Christ. Always beyond us, because that's what helps us not get stuck in where we are at the given time. It was a process of unfolding for us because we weren't sure. We were looking at a few different communities. One of the big questions the sisters said was, who would want us? 28 sisters, ages 50 to 98. Who's going to take us on? And that was, we had to really work with that. The first thing we did was decided to sell our monastery in Eau Claire. And, when people heard that, they knew that we were, going to be doing something, and they'd say, well, now how are you doing with all of this? And I would just kind of simply say, well, biblically, we're doing quite well. I said, we don't know where we're going, and we don't know when we'll get there, but, we have trust that somehow it's all going to work out as such. But it was a great relief for us when we kept visiting a couple of other monasteries, and the sisters said that they really thought that it looked like St. Ben's, but anybody could make any decision. And part of grief and gratitude is always ritual and symbolism. And so we ritualized the day that we determined we were going to make this decision, that we gathered in chapel, and each sister read out loud. I brought the microphone to them, where they felt God was calling them to go. And then we put it in the basket, and when the last one was there, and we all knew we were going to the same place, the basket was taken up and placed on the altar. And then we sang our Sushi Pay, which we had sung when we made profession. So those kinds of things were extremely difficult, very tender, but very profound. And again, it was always seen in that sense of gratitude. This is hard, but just think, we have some place to go. We have sisters that we know. Many of us our parents were in nursing homes, rooming with people that never met. They had also had to downsize. And so this is something that we just all face as such. It was important and a real revelation for the sisters as we worked together that sadness and gratitude can go together. And so whatever may be happening or unfolding in our lives, it's always important, not from a Pollyanna denial, but from setting it in a larger context. There's always something for which we can be grateful. One of the first things we had done was to have a grief workshop together so we would know what's going to be happening, how people respond to grief and how to attend to it. So that kind of knowledge is very helpful if you're in a grieving situation as such. This is why grief support groups are so profound and so great. Anger is one of the most common things that happens at a time of transition and change. And anger is never the primary emotion, and that was wonderful for us to learn. Fear and sadness are. And those were very big for the sisters. And so you could begin to deal with those. And I would sit with them, particularly the sisters in the nursing home, and by this time we had 6 that were in the nursing home, and I would just ask them, what are you going to miss the most? And what are you most grateful for? What's the greatest treasured memory you're going to take with you? And for those that couldn't always express it, I'd say, well, now if you could play a piece of music right now, what piece of music would you play? Or what color would you use if you were going to paint something? So you find ways so that they can express what's going on inside of them. It's so important, and for yourself too. My dream someday is to sit down at the piano, not having had any lessons, and play Rhapsody in Blue. When we came to St. Ben's and we came to visit in the different living groups, because we knew the sisters would be moving into the living groups, one of the things that I said to the sisters at St. Ben's was, now remember, if you come upon one of the sisters and she's really sad or she's crying, that's not an indictment that you're doing something wrong or haven't done enough, because you'll just need to let them have that time to grieve and help them process it. But don't take it as a personal affront. The same thing was true when we moved 6 of the sisters into the nursing home, and I asked to talk to the staff, the nursing staff, and I said, now, if one of the sisters dies, please don't think that we think you haven't taken care of them, because transfer trauma is very huge at a time like this. Most of those sisters hadn't even traveled more than, they probably were in a car at the most 20 minutes to a half an hour, and we were driving them 3 hours to get up here. My biggest prayer was that nobody got car sick. So I mean, it's just real little things that you take a look at and you begin to deal with. The big thing is, again, that I would say, please note here, is talk about it. Talk about what's going on and invite each other to talk about it. Ask others how they're feeling, because some of us don't get started unless you ask us. Others, you never have to ask. They'll let you know just exactly how they're feeling. And we need them all. Also, and letting people be where they are is so terribly important. We had one of our sisters that was in the nursing home that just was sure they weren't going to know how to take care of her at St. Scholastica, and she just had a terrible time. And fortunately, I realized I just needed to let her do that. So each week I'd try to go over and visit her. And we moved in May of 2010. We had moved the sisters in the nursing home. By January of the following year, I went to see her one day and she said, I think I turned a corner. And I said, I think you have. And she said, well, what was wrong with me anyway? And I said, I give up. What was wrong with you? But then I did thank her, because she taught me a great lesson that you just need to let people be where we are. All of that was very helpful as the sisters from Utah came home, because I could be with them and say, now these are some of the things you may want to think about, you may want to talk about, you may want to prepare yourself for, because you may not have the exact same experience, but there'll be a variation on the theme here. And that was very helpful for them as we brought them home, which everybody got home in this June of 2012. In 2011, we had sold St. Bede Monastery, and 2 weeks ago, rejoice with us, we were able to sell the monastery at Utah. So I'm the one that could never sell Holy Childhood stamps. Those of you who remember Holy Childhood stamps. 2 monasteries, yeah. Don't tell me God doesn't have a sense of humor. The other thing that I would just like to mention is the whole area of resiliency. And those of you who are in the field of psychology particularly, they're doing a lot of studies on resiliency. We've always known that children are resilient. And maybe that's the piece of us that continues to be resilient at times when we need it. One of the things that they found that I did not realize is that you can learn resiliency. You're not just born with it. And it basically is, as they define it, is the capacity to face or overcome, be strengthened by and transformed by adversity or hardship. It's the ability that Robert Wicks likes to say, is the ability to bounce forward. We always talk about bouncing back. You don't want to go back, you want to bounce forward. And that's the ability of what a resilience is. The first thing that helps with developing an attitude and an experience of resiliency is to make a real decision over what you've got control of. We don't have control over much, but our attitude is one thing. And that's where facing the grief and facing the gratitude is so important. And what the language that we use is vitally important also. I've been with people as I've been journeying with them, and they'll talk, they'll say to me, well, I'm going to work on my attitude. And I always say, don't work on your attitude. Tend to your attitude. I love that word tend. Tend to it like you tend to a garden. Because when we work at it, we go at it like gangbusters. But we tend to it. We tend to it with delicacy, firmness, and a little bit of everything, because that's what you need for a garden. And that's the other thing is, I always encourage people not to talk about balance. We don't need balance in our life. You get a balanced teeter-totter, you don't go anywhere. Yeah? We need integration. We need to integrate all these experiences in our life and delight in them and know that the past is prelude. So that was one of the first things, is take a look at your attitude and what do you need to be able to move into tending to things as well as to integrating things. Secondly, you have to have an accurate and realistic appraisal of your expectations and abilities. We had a retreat director. We had some of the sisters from St. Ben's come down to St. Bede's for a retreat just before in June of that year of 2010. And the retreat director was wonderful because it was mixed, both communities. He said, now I want to just tell you two things. You sisters from St. Ben's, you're going to be saying to yourselves a few months down the road, if I have to be nice to one more sister from St. Bede's, and you from St. Bede's are going to be saying, if I have to be grateful for one more kind thing they did that makes me feel guilty for feeling sad, I can't take it. But that was very helpful for us to be able to experience the reality of it. That was a question that very often happened. The sister that had the greatest difficulty, she said, I don't know what's wrong with me. She said, they're so kind and so good, I can't even feel sad. So, you have to, again, deal with that in whatever way that you can, but at least be aware of it. And then the primary factor in resiliency, and this is one that, for us as sisters, it's just a given, is our social network. The social network that we have, the friends that you have, the people you're willing to let in, anybody in community. This is why sisters live so long. We outlive everybody else. Women outlive men, and sisters outlive everybody else because of that social network. Now, it doesn't mean we always enjoy or love or get along with each other. Let me make it perfectly clear on that one. But when the chips are down, we've got each other. And so develop that social network. That's going to be very important as such. One of the things that St. Ben's did, and Sister Georgianne is here with us, and she was a part of this, was to form a transition team that worked with us when we came so that we could do the processing. For many, many areas, they have grief support groups for people who are in transitions. I would say always, always make use of it. The last thing I would say about resiliency, grief, and gratitude is it always helps to have a good sense of humor. So if you don't, I would say start working on it. And I think I would just close with that part with just a very familiar story here. When I first came then, a little daunted. I was going from 28 sisters to 280 sisters this time. But I knew them all. I could call them all by name and had experiences with most of them, not all, but most of them. And with the sisters at Utah, then I was very close to many of them. At any rate, I was very determined I was going to, really enter in here, and I was going to get to know people, because coming into a new place, they're talking about people, you have no clue who they are, what they've done. So they were going on at table one night. This wonderful person, he is so good, and he always is so professional. I just love it when he just has such a nice voice. And so I leaned into the table and I said, now, can you tell me who this is so that and how he's connected to us, so that when I meet him, I will know? And they looked at me and they said, Michaela, he's the weatherman on Channel 9. But it helped, it helped. And I would say the last thing that I want to break for anybody to share anything else is that what's happened with the sisters from Utah, the sisters from Wisconsin, and the sisters from Minnesota is that we have always been bonded because of the heritage of Benedict that we hold, and the rule that we cherish, and the liturgy of the hours that we're with each other in, day out, and the celebration of Eucharist. What happened with this experience was it just deepened. But it was what brought us together and what holds us together and what we are delighted to be able to share in experiences like this with each other and with you. And now the floor is open to any comments, questions. Yes, but, sisters. I was a middle school teacher for many years. I'm used to yes, buts. Thank you. Thank you. That was, yes, Jack?
Would you do it again?
Would I do it again? Absolutely. Absolutely. I would not even have to reflect on it. It was such a graced experience. And again, for me, the past being prelude as having gone through that experience, it's hard to think of what God's not going to lead us through if he has to. I mean, if God has to. So it gives you much hope for the future. It was emotionally a roller coaster because I had my own emotions as well as the emotions of each of the sisters. But that was another funny story. We had a wonderful chaplain. You know, when he realized this is what we were doing, he sat me down. You know, it's wonderful to have friends. And he said, now, Michaela, you really care about the sisters, and they know you care about them. But they can't pack if you're holding their hand. So, so I just had the people that were there that God gave me the grace to stay open to. I said that may be true, but it still hurts. But it was what he was really saying, and he and I have talked about it since. What he was really saying is trust your sisters. They can handle this. They can handle this. They're great women. And I think that's what we bring to each other in anything that we're going through, is the trust that people can handle it. If we treat each other like, oh, you poor thing, you're too fragile to be able to handle this, then you just solidified it. But if you give them, ask them what they need, don't tell them what they need, but ask them what they need and then support them in going through. I pray to God not, but who's to know? I originally was born in Virginia, Minnesota, as Chick said, and then we moved to Eau Claire, and so I went to high school there. I always thought I was going to join Duluth. I ended up joining Eau Claire. I'm now at St. Ben's. Maybe I'll be buried here, but I don't know. Yes?
What's been the biggest surprise?
Surprise, not in the sense that, I can't imagine that that's happening. But I would say over and over again, the support of the sisters from St. Ben's toward those of us who have come in. It's just, you can just feel it. When special feast days come, like the Feast of St. Bede comes, there's notes, there's cards, there's acknowledgement of it. They never celebrated that before because they didn't have to, but now St. Ben's celebrates it. It's that kind of thing that they find ways to be able to do this and to make us feel at home and not make us feel like we're separating ourselves. The work that Sister Nancy and her administrative team did in preparing the community here, they had made arrangements so that any sister who wanted to could come down to visit St. Bede Monastery before we came. And so we'd have two groups a week coming in. It was just wonderful because we got to know them on a small basis. And one of the things that touched us was that many of them said, we wanted to come because we wanted to have an appreciation of what you were leaving. And it was a monastery that we built in 1964 and moved into it. We broke ground in 63. I was there to watch the ground be broken, watch it go up brick by brick, help move into it, help move out of it, and then sign the papers to sell it. So it was something, but the sisters coming down was just wonderful. Sister Lois.
I just want to say, one of the, peak experience or moments was the day when we finalized, we had a chance to think and talk a lot about, can we accept, all the various things, but the day in chapter when the vote was taken, we talked about, is this something we will really be able to open our hearts and commit to? I'll never forget that day when we all said definitely yes, and Nancy grabbed the cell phone and called Michaela, and all of us in one accord and said yes. The whole community, it was very
Yeah.
I'll never forget that moment, I'm sure.
Yeah, I will go to my grave with that moment. And then they broke into praise God from whom all blessings flow. You know, this was an actual vote. We as a community had to vote to ask them to take us, and then they had to vote to accept us. It's very humbling. But no, I will never, ever, ever forget that when the call came. Sister Coleman.
Well, I want to say, because you emphasize our kindness, we experienced the coming of St. Pete as a giant shot in the arm.
Oh, yeah.
Some new life. A lot of their irons.
Yeah. Yes, Sister
I
Georgianne.
do want you to know that we not only remember St. Pete, but we become more Irish. When the prioress comes all dressed up with big green glasses, we know it's St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you, dear. Yes, John.
Thank you for sharing what you've learned through the change. As you look to the future, 20 years out, and think about the monastery, what changes does your community see on the horizon?
We definitely see changes. We definitely see changes, and we're working with that right now in terms of the use of, again, the good stewardship of our facilities. I can't even imagine, given that I never thought I'd be standing here talking about this, what it's going to be, but I know God's going to be in it. That's what I know. And I know that there will be something. It will be probably looking very different, and God will be there. Thank you. It's 12:30. I'd be happy. Oh, you're sure? One more. There's one more, and then. Oh, yes. In Eau Claire, the foundation at the University of Eau Claire purchased the building, and they have a nature academy for children in what was our school and eventually retreat center, like a preschool up to age 6. And then they are using the other parts of the building for some residence overflow. They, like we have here at St. Ben's, they don't have enough residence halls. We're hoping, and pray with us, because one of the things they would like to do is to have the Ho Chunk Nation students who come from the Dells area. They find that if they keep the Native American students in one place together, rather having them all over the campus at Eau Claire, that they do better. And so they're hoping to have them this fall be living in what would have been our monastery. And that was another part of the ritual that we did. We blessed every room, as did Utah when we left, giving thanks for what had taken place in that room, but then blessing what the future will hold for anybody, being in those rooms. So that was another piece of it. Utah was just purchased by a company that will be opening and keeping in the, we kept up the education, they're keeping up the healthcare. It will be a rehabilitation program that will be set up there for drug and alcohol rehab. So, thank you so very much. God's blessings. Yeah.
Thank you, Sister Michaela. You're so gracious. Just a couple other comments. I know we've got a couple people here from the registrar's office, so if you could let us know what we can do to get that quarter credit for the monastic studies. And Sister Michaela, when you sit down at the piano and crank out your version of Rhapsody in Blue, I want to be there. But thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day.